All right. Welcome to the Park and Rec Commission regular meeting of January 15th, 2026. The time is now 6:06. Becky, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Emerson, and I know she is absent this evening. Commissioner Cabrales?
Here.
Commissioner Gutierrez is also absent. And then we have Chair Pasternak.
Here.
And Commissioner Sandoval.
Here.
All right, thank you.
All right. First item here is our minutes. We're approving the regular meeting minutes of November 20th, 2026. Did everyone have a chance to review, and does anyone have any questions? All right, well, if that's the case, let's have a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
I motion to second.
Becky, would you take a roll?
Commissioner Cabrales?
Yes.
Chair Pasternak?
Yes.
And Commissioner Sandoval?
Yes.
All right, motion approved. Thank you.
All right, and since there's no public present, we will skip the public expression and move on to agenda items. All right, first agenda item is draft guidelines for library and recreation facility use.
Well, Happy New Year. Good to see you all. I didn't have a presentation I put together for this because this is a pretty text-heavy kind of review. This is a policy proposal for some new guidelines that we're recommending, but I'm happy to pull them up on the screen if we'd like to review them and take a look. It's a part of the agenda packet, and it's included in the staff report. But this is something that we've been working on with our library team. We have, as you know, we have a bunch of rules at our facilities. But within our community centers, we don't have a specific set of guidelines that we've been using to set clear expectations about use of our facilities. So it varies from facility to facility, and it hasn't really been codified as part of our policy. The library has had a set of guidelines that they've used historically. They were looking at reviewing their policy, and we thought this was a good opportunity for us to take a look at potentially adopting and streamlining what we do as a department. So what we've done is we've reviewed what the library policy was, and then taken a look at what some of our facility needs are. We do occasionally have community members that exhibit some inappropriate behaviors in our community centers. And so this is kind of also in response to us trying to find a way to make sure that we can set those clear expectations, really understand what are the rules and what are some things that are truly inappropriate behaviors in the community centers. How do we inform and educate the community about that? So we're hoping that this could be a tool that would help to educate the community and also help them understand that if they do exhibit certain inappropriate behaviors, that there may need to be some appropriate consequences that are put in place, such as temporary suspension of privileges to come to the community center, use the facilities, or attend the programs. And we hope that we don't have to do that, but occasionally we do experience some behaviors that just aren't acceptable for the community. They're health and safety issues or issues that might lead to health and safety issues for individuals here or our staff. So that's what we're really trying to address with the adoption of this new policy. There's a few kind of areas of this that I think we really looked at. The library, when they were looking at reviewing their policy, they were looking at the scope, the applicability of their existing rules, and whether any updates were timely. What are some behaviors that are actually encouraged? I think we also want to take a look at things that we want to make sure the community knows we want to happen, both in the library and the community center. As I mentioned, some of the prohibited conduct. We made a few updates on the library side and tried to really align policies to make sure they're applicable department-wide, as well as really looking at what would the consequences be and how would we enforce any of the consequences. As well as if there was a need for someone to appeal, if there are any accommodations that need to be made, make sure that's really clear to the community. So where we've landed is a draft policy that's been at this point reviewed by our department, It's also been reviewed by our city attorney's office to take a look at legal consistency and compliance. And it's recently, just this week, it was also reviewed by the Board of Library Trustees at their regular meeting. So they've had a chance to take a look at it. And I don't know, Catherine, did they have any comments or feedback earlier this week?
No, I think there were some just questions on how it was applied and kind of what resources were available to staff in kind of enforcement. And then, yeah, kind of like that cross-departmental collaboration. So I think, some of the things so this is something at the library that has been a critical tool for many, many years. This is at least its third iteration of kind of updates, and is something that we utilize there on a weekly, if not daily basis. So staff there is very well versed at kind of the enforcement and having these conversations with patrons that are not abiding by the policy. And we do have a lot of partnerships and resources at the city. Santa Fe Police Department is always available to support staff if they feel in an unsafe situation approaching or addressing community members with who are not abiding by the code of conduct. SAFE is another really important resource that's kind of we utilize that a lot here as well as at the library. So there's a lot of resources to support staff and kind of the implementation of this. And I think the library the library staff are also available to kind of, troubleshoot and help the recreation team, as this is a newer process.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to pull up the draft policy on the screen if you'd like to take a closer look at it, or if you have any questions about any of the specifics that are being proposed, if you like, or open it up to discussion at this point.
Would you all like to see the draft policy?
Yeah, I would say go ahead and bring it up. I had looked it up before, but I'm just looking at it again to make sure there's nothing.
Oh, sorry, the wrong one.
One of the things that it's okay to
Yes, please.
throw questions out. So in my experience, one of the main issues that I remember being a problem was in around the building, and then people trying to walk through the park or whatever to get to the building, and how, like, what are the parameters to which this has to extend, I guess, is sort of my question.
Yeah, I think there's maybe a few things we could touch on there. I think one is that this is really identifying any library and recreation facility. So, this is differentiated from our parks. So this would primarily be looking at our community centers, but I think this would also apply broadly to like our pool complex, Falkirk, our sports fields as well. Each of those facilities may have their own kind of unique subset of rules that are really important for health and safety. Like the pool is going to have its own rules there. The sports fields are going to have their own rules, but these are more broadly written to apply to all of those different types of facilities. I think when we get into like the exterior of the community centers, there may be more park-based rules that would apply. And so, for example, I know certain parks, the city has prohibited either on a temporary or permanent basis camping.
All parks.
All parks at this point in time. So yeah, thank you. Good clarification.
Yeah,
all
it's
parks.
been a process. So,
Yeah. And so, there are certain behaviors that just wouldn't be allowed. Smoking is not allowed in the parks. Other, indecent exposure, things like that, right? That wouldn't be allowed. Being in a pathway or like a doorway that would block access to the facility, that would be something that we could take a look at and make sure that we're able to move people out of that pathway. So there's other such rules that we might be able to look at that are in our Muni Code or housed elsewhere, but these are really focused specifically on the facilities. So. So I can just kind of walk through this and jump in, ask any questions if you'd like. I know it's kind of hard to see on the screen. I'm not sure if I can make that any bigger there or not.
I think it's fine.
We're reading
Yeah,
that
it's
okay?
it's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
That's one too big. So I think that's as big as I'm going to be able to make it here. So
That's fine.
So I think, as I mentioned, the guidelines here, we want people to really be able to explore the library collection, to engage in all of our recreation activities, to be able to connect with our staff and each other, and really take advantage of all the great facilities we have here. And I think, we framed that at the top of this document because that is the intent, right? I know when we put rules and policy together, it can sound like don't do this, that, and the other, but we hope that by putting these rules out, it'll help everyone understand what you can do at the facilities. And then for the prohibited conduct, we've bucketed this into a few categories. So category 1 relates to safety and security. So, I think the first one here, prohibited, anything that's be prohibited under federal, state, or local law. That one's pretty straightforward. That should not be happening in the community centers. Loud, abusive, threatening, harassing behaviors, engaging in any sexual behavior, public displays of affection that would disrupt the environment, use of the facility while under the influence of alcohol or non-prescribed drugs or weapons of any sort. We feel that those are reasonable rules to put in place that would not be allowed. It relates to your question about pathways. So blocking or impeding access to entrances or exits, walkways, any inappropriate items in the facility, bicycle, shopping carts, things of that nature. We have had, on occasion, that is something that does come up and can be really unwieldy for our staff to try to manage. Bringing in items that would interfere with the operations of the facility or block areas. I think this does come up, I think, more frequently in the library where you get a lot of people in a contained area at the cubbies or the cubicles, and then there's bags or things really overflowing. So I think this is intended to help really create some expectations around what's allowable, how much space do we think is reasonable for personal items to come in. That's why that is pretty explicitly stated, the 16 by 18 by 24. And we're like, well, what does that mean, right? It's roughly the size of a carry-on suitcase. So, and leaving personal belongings or animals unattended at the facilities, that would be something that also would not be allowed. So in the facility use and conduct section, there's times when lying on the floors or sleeping may be allowed, right? But I think in most contexts, the community center is really not an appropriate place to take a multi-hour nap, right? I think there's always exceptions to that if we were setting up a shelter environment or if it was part of a program,
Shavasana.
Yeah, right. So there's definitely, I think there's going to be exceptions there based on the program type, but failure to wear appropriate attire, essentially messing with city equipment, if you're unplugging, the computers or the systems, inappropriate use or rearrangement of the furniture, things that wouldn't be approved there. I think inappropriate use of restrooms, this is something that does come up routinely at our community centers where, we're not set up in a way that can readily accommodate like laundering clothing or bathing. We don't have showers at our community centers and we definitely understand that want to be empathetic to people who might be in need, but we do have the ability to point to other resources and facilities where that type of behavior would be okay, and they're set up with a facility that can accommodate that. So we are trying to clarify that would be an appropriate behavior to launder clothes or bathe in the community center restrooms. And really any actions that would create an unsanitary environment, either in the libraries or the community centers. Yeah, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question about the perfume, I think it's F.
Yeah.
How prevalent is that kind of complaint? And I guess that's one of the more subjective items on the list. So
say that at the library in particular, it's often more body odor. And staff are trained to approach it very sensitively and kind of, providing people resources on showering.
It's because somebody complained about it to them, or they like walked by and
I mean, we usually don't interfere unless, yes, someone will complain and staff also observe that it's
bad.
significant and overwhelming and
Right.
that it would interfere. I guess there is a judgment call, but if it's a judgment call, then we're probably not gonna address it.
Right.
But there's a certain point at which it's not a judgment call.
Yeah. Okay.
And that it's really the extreme cases.
Yeah. Okay. That was my.
And
I
just
think you're
having it
right. I think there's
documented.
definitely, that's a sensitive topic.
Yeah.
And one that I think our staff, we talked about how we want to make sure that we are really sensitive to our community and it would need to be on the extreme side.
And I think that there may be situations where, like, if you're in a small classroom and someone's really wearing like overpowering cologne and someone else has a sensitivity, then it's a conversation, right?
Yeah.
But it's more predominantly for the body odor is where we see it being applied.
Okay. I think this next category here, service and account policies. So fraudulent use of library cards or accounts. This is one we talked about a bit. Item 4B, leaving children under 8 years of age unattended without supervision of a caregiver that's aged 15 or older. I think it would be unusual, I think, for us in our recreation community center setting to have unattended kids that weren't participating in some sort of a program. I think we do occasionally have maybe some special events that would happen. A lot of those are park-based. I think rarely would we use the community center for that. I think this really pertains more specifically to the library. They definitely, I would expect maybe see this type of behavior more routinely at the library, where there's kind of a presumption of supervision, but there's really not staff dedicated to supervise minors in that setting. And I think
I would assume the pool might be another area where that's something
Right.
that's very important.
That's a good point.
Rule to establish.
Yeah, and potentially the sports fields as well. I think that's another area where that may be a type of thing that could cause some concern or some risk to kids if they're not attended.
That seems like a serious one to me. Like, what is the enforcement for that kind of situation? Because like, there's obviously
So the
child and-
library actually has a whole separate unattended child policy that lays out kind of like, if a child is unattended, this is, the first step is to try and, reach the parents. And then if that kind of progresses to, calling police or someone else who can come in, take kind of possession of the child. So I think we would probably
Similarly, we
do
probably
something.
refer to that policy in recreation. I think, a lot of these cases too, it's conversations. It's like, hey, is there a parent nearby? And I think oftentimes there is. Maybe it's just educating that parent about being in closer proximity to their kids. But yeah, if there really was an unattended child, I think our rec team would take the same action.
And I think, one thing that might be kind of getting from the conversation is, in most of these cases, the first step is education and conversation, right? We're not going to go straight to, consequences and enforcement, with a few exceptions where there's really like a risk to staff or violent behavior, things like that. So yeah, it's the first step is always education and letting people know. And then if it progresses from there,
People keep repeating the behavior.
repetitive behavior, then we kind of move on to kind of more the enforcement options.
So the next category here, commercial and solicitation activities. If someone were to be selling merchandise in the community center or at the fields, that would not be. And petitioning, conducting surveys, leafleting. Occasionally that does happen. We do have individuals that will come to the community centers or events, and oftentimes that can really be a disturbance for our programs. So those would be the prohibited behaviors. And again, this would be in conjunction to really cite specific rules. Some of the consequences, hopefully we'd be able to have conversations with individual. I think the first step for us would be to have a conversation with them and likely a warning from our staff to give them the opportunity to correct that behavior. And, I think if it were repeating from there or there's a refusal to comply, then I think we'd be recommending immediately removing them from the premises. I think a lot of this is going to depend on context and the severity of the behavior as well. I think in situations where there's, definitely someone who's repeating that behavior or it's severe enough, we recommend a temporary suspension of access to the facilities. And we've talked about, well, what's that? How long? How long would be reasonable to suspend someone? And I think, in practice, we've seen suspensions of a day, of a few days, of a week. I think in extreme situations, we have had to suspend privileges for longer periods of time to make sure that behavior was not going to create harm for the community. And so we've written this to give ourselves flexibility in how long that suspension would be written up for. Mm-hmm. I think, in some of those cases where it was a lengthy suspension, we'd be having conversations at a high level about what's appropriate, in response to this behavior to try to match that to we've written this for up to 1 year period of time. And if behavior exceeded that, then we would have the ability under this policy to permanently restrict someone's access to specific services or facilities or programs. I think in the past, we have had to take that action at the library, I believe, had to permanently restrict access because individuals' behavior was just really posing significant threats to health and safety. So that is the consequences that are proposed here. We do have an appeals process. If someone feels that a suspension or a permanent restriction was imposed unfairly, they'd have the opportunity to write to our city manager's office and request an appeal. So there's a process for that. And similarly, there's a process for reasonable accommodations. If someone requires an accommodation for whatever reason, they're welcome to send that our way for review to the city. That we do have a process in place for that. That is the proposed policy at this point. So yeah, any questions?
Sorry. I have a couple of questions. So obviously a lot of this is targeted to the homeless population that's potentially around the facility. It sort of seems like maybe.
I wouldn't say it's targeted at any particular population. I think, this is written in a way that I think is more focused on inappropriate behaviors that we've experienced in our facilities, regardless of who is, behaving poorly. Like, to me, it's really focused on the things that we've deemed like either health and safety issues or really problematic for us to be able to operate our facilities effectively and run our programs. So now, to your point, I do think that we have seen individuals who are unhoused who have maybe come to our community centers or come to our libraries because they're public places that are open to the community. And so, for example, laundering, clothing, or bathing, right? That is one that there's probably a correlation there.
Right.
But I don't think we've necessarily written these specifically trying to target any population.
Right. I guess, it's hard not to read it and see that the unhoused could be being referenced, and I'm like, I guess, would it be weird to put some sort of resource, like if you're talking specifically about laundering, to putting some reference to the resources that are available in this document so that anyone reading it knows that we're providing those resources as a step in this. Because if it feels like we're just on the surface just saying like you can't do these things, you're saying that the staff is equipped with that.
Yeah, we do have resource guides and a lot of kind of printed up information that we have available when we're having these conversations. To be honest with you, those change so frequently.
Right.
it's very hard to keep those updated. So incorporating it into a policy would be.
I don't necessarily mean like even anything that's necessarily concrete, more so than like staff will, do its best to, provide resources for those who need it. I mean, like a asterisk kind of thing. So we're, just putting that language into a document like this just seems like it might feel like a little bit of a softer landing for people who might feel that this is threatening language to someone who is, has a hard time complying to these rules.
And I will say our intent is, if someone's like really in violation of the guidelines, like, yes, we give them, here's the guidelines, here's your warning letter. But we're also going to be like taking excerpts from this and kind of like creating more of a packet, right? Like, so if someone has a body odor thing, we'll have kind of something that's like a little more specific to that type of behavioral or, violation, and is kind of paired with that type of information. So I don't think the intent of like the way the policy is that it's drafted is to necessarily, like every time pull it out. But I hear you. I don't know. We could look at because I know in the enforcement section it kind of talks about like the warning is the first step.
Right. Well, and then to that, in that section, you talked about depending on severity language, which is not included in that. I think that might be helpful to include something around that in that first section, because I understand that these aren't like step 1, 2, 3, 4, because depending on the severity, you could jump right to number 4. So that makes sense. But I think having the language of the severity in that headline, in that intro paragraph there might be helpful to understand, like, for the public.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are good points, and I know, Catherine, I think that's something we can consider. Okay.
I'm in marketing, always thinking about communications.
Yeah, and I think, to that point, you're right? We don't want this to be viewed as something that is an aggressive document that's intended to scare people away or, reduce people's desire to come to our facilities. We are open to the public. We are open to everyone in our community, and we want people to be able to use the centers, use the libraries. We just want to make sure that use and the behaviors of our community is consistent with the guidelines. So,
And I think the other, like, there's the marketing, like, communications lens, and then there's also the legal.
Totally.
So I'm like, what would our city attorney say about that?
Yeah.
Trying to strike the right balance.
Yeah, of course. I get it.
I had one too, of just as the suggestion, because again, I have been here and seen the poor people behind the desk who are just trying to do their jobs and then have to sort of change roles. Are there, I think this is what you're saying, but I just want to confirm that there would be sort of like guidelines for them so that they have a way to approach us and they're not just like, okay, now go deal with this problem, and like they would have a way that is taught to them of steps they can go through. So protecting the people that are having to enforce these in the moment when things are hectic. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I think our staff have to varying degrees, they've all gone through different levels of training for de-escalation. How do we handle really working with challenging conversations with the community? And so I think we work together as a team on that. But you're right. I think a lot of our frontline staff are the ones who have, they're the ones who first notice this behavior and they identify and they see it. And so, I think depending on the severity and their comfort level based on the training that they've received, some of them are fully open to that conversation. Hey, let's have a dialogue. Most times, I think the behaviors can be stemmed from there. But I think if it's more severe, often it'll be bumped up to like the next supervisory level. And I think just depending on who's involved in that training, maybe it's that handout, about, hey, like this is some information about, the body odor, the offensive smells. This is information about services for where you can go take a shower, where you can do laundry, or other information that's pertinent to that. Mm-hmm. And then usually if we're to a point where we're immediately removing someone from the premises, or we're issuing a suspension letter. Usually a supervisor or someone at my level or Catherine's level is involved in helping to craft that and talking through with the staff. Hey, like, what's appropriate? Like, have we done this? Have we done that? Like, what services have we connected this individual with? Or, like, have we done everything we can?
And I think, I'll just say, I think in the last year, there's probably been 5-6 times where we thought this would be really good. We need to. So it's not happening in the community centers nearly at the level that it's happening in the libraries. And in the libraries, we do have a pretty robust training process for those staff. It's an online training that is available to recreation staff. It's just not quite as critical to the recreation staff jobs as it is the libraries.
No.
So we do, I think when those types of things come, typically the frontline staff are observing it, but it is often the supervisor or Craig or myself, that's kind of the one that we're looped in. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, well, at this time we can request a motion and second on this agenda item. Only 3 of us all.
To receive the report, is that what we're doing?
Can I motion and I'll second this time, or
Oh, yeah, I motion to receive the report.
second?
Becky, will you call the roll?
All right, Commissioner Cabrales,
Yes.
Chair Pasternak,
Yes.
and Commissioner Sandoval.
Yes.
All right, motion approved. Thank you.
All right, next agenda item, CPRS D1 Professional Service Award nomination.
Yeah, this one's a fun one for me. So California Park and Recreation Society, we're part of District 1, and annually they have a banquet, and part of that banquet is to celebrate community service award winners as well as professional service award winners. And this year we got together with our rec and childcare team, talked about who we thought we might want to nominate, if we wanted to nominate anyone for those awards. And I think everyone was in agreement with that. Steve Mason would be a really incredible person to acknowledge this year. Steve retired from the city last year after 16 years with us. And Steve has also worked for the city of Sausalito, for Foster City, for the Strawberry Recreation District, the city of Novato. He's made a really incredible impact on not only Santa Fe, but Marin County. And so we want to nominate him for a professional service award. Wanted to bring that to you, see what you thought, and see if you're in agreement with that. And if so, we'd be submitting a nomination. The banquet is on Saturday, January 31st up in Napa. So we'd be inviting him to attend, and hopefully a good chunk of our team would be able to attend as well. So, and of course, you would all be invited to be there if you wanted to be there too. So, yeah.
Any questions?
I think this is great.
Yeah.
Does he know about this, or?
Yeah, I talked to him. I was like, "Hey, Steve, like, would you be available to go to Napa Community Center on January 31st?" And he said he would be available. He said that retirement is treating him well. I asked him, what he was up to that day. And he said, well, he had to set an alarm that morning to go golfing with a friend, and then he had to walk his dog. So he was tired.
It's keeping busy.
That's excellent. All right, so our recommended action is to support the nomination of Steve Mason. Do we have, are we doing this in a traditional way, or how do we?
Yeah, I think you could go ahead and take a vote on that. I just say before you vote too, there's so many deserving community service award potential winners and other folks that we talked about. And I think at this point, this is the recommendation for this year, but we're always open to suggestions. If you know of anyone in the community that you see really doing a great job that you think is deserving of some recognition, this is one way to be recognized. There's also state level recognition, national level recognition. So there's all kinds of ways that we could support the community. So just want to throw that out there too. If any of you know of anyone that you think we should consider, send them our way.
That's great. All right, Becky, would you call the roll?
Well, I think we still need a motion
Oh,
in a
yeah.
second.
I will
Yeah.
move to support the nomination of Steve Mason.
Yes, and I second.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Commissioner Cabrales,
Yes.
Chair Pasternak,
Yes.
all right, and Commissioner Sandoval.
Yes.
All right, motion approved. Thank you.
Very exciting. All right, and our next agenda item is to review the draft Park and Rec Commission 2026 annual work plan.
Okay, I'm gonna pull this up on the screen. So I think you've all been through this a couple of years now. Annually, we like to bring you a work plan to, oh, that is so scary small print. I will have to zoom in on this. But annually, we bring you an idea of what we think the work plans can look like. What types of agenda items can you expect to see at each month? And so this is, something that is not written in stone. It definitely does get shifted around annually, but this helps us also to map out when we expect certain reports needing to come your way. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this.
And I think, one of the other reasons we started doing this work plan at the beginning of the year is to give the commissioners opportunity to provide feedback on if there's things that you would really like to discuss or, us to present on or bring to the commission. This is a good time to raise those as well.
It is. I think that's led to some changes. I think last year, for example, we brought you in at our January meeting 2025 an annual program report where we got all of our team together and did a program report. I think we're looking at bringing that your way probably on a biannual basis. That's a big lift for our team to get all that information together, and we're planning on that on a biannual basis at this point in time. And so I think in prior years we were doing each of those program reports independently, kind of peppered throughout the calendar year, and I think that's led to a good change for our team to really kind of think about a consolidated effort. Okay, so for 2026, for the February meeting, we're hoping to bring you an update on some improvements to our park signage. We're drafting new park signs that will include our general park rules, as well as maybe specific rules for areas like our picnic sites, the sports fields, the sports courts, the playgrounds. And I think we're making good progress on that. We're hoping to bring you an update to show you what those signs will look like, the draft language, as well as some of the proposed changes like placement in some of the parks. Also hoping to bring you a annual Measure A work plan for review, how we would propose to use those Measure A tax funds for the next fiscal year. Golden Air's annual program report and Rinpoche annual program report. Any of these organizations that we have an agreement with are required to report annually. And so we try to time those with those groups in a way that makes sense for them and makes sense in our calendar. We're actively working on a cost recovery analysis, hoping to bring you an update in March with some draft recommendations and a proposal for any outcomes from that recovery analysis. Hear from Sanderfeld Girls Softball, and hopefully hear an update on the Canal Community Garden Fair Grant update that they received. They received a $35,000 grant to make some improvements at Canal Community Garden, and that was actually received about a year and a half ago. So we've been a little slow. I want to acknowledge we've been a little slow on that one, but we're making some good headway there. Annually, we bring you a report from the Pickleweed Advisory Committee. We've got that scheduled for April, and then a biannual status report update from our Parks Maintenance team. We're working on we're reviewing and potentially going to be making some changes to our sports field priority allocation policy. We've seen
I'd say tweaks.
It's tweaks. Yeah, not changes, tweaks. Minor revisions. And what we're seeing is two things. I think one is Pickleweed Field. Now that it's new and it's open year round, we're seeing some increased demand for usage there, as well as maybe just patterns of use, some of which are maybe causing some problems on like weekend programming. And so we're trying to take a look at addressing the issues there. So some of the conflicting demand we're seeing with the exact same priority user groups. So for example, a youth local resident nonprofit sports program. If two of those groups come to us and they both say, we want the field at the same time, it makes it hard for us to make a decision about who should get the field. And so we're taking a look at whether there's any opportunity to clarify in our policy who should get priority in those types of situations. Oftentimes, it's just a conversation with both groups to say, hey, you both want the field at the same time? Could we shuffle, or could we, compromise, maybe shift dates? And most of the time it gets squared up, but we want to see if there's anything we can do to help with that. And that really, I think, primarily pertains to Pickleweed Field, as well as Albert Park Baseball Stadium. We see some similar conflicts there. So then moving into June, I think tentatively would like to consider maybe a park tour field trip. We've done that the last few years. Still to be determined which parks we would go to. We've got a couple ideas of spots that might be a good fit this year. It really just depends on, I think, as the spring progresses, what makes the most sense, and maybe open to suggestions from you as well on what you'd want to see. As of right now, probably no meeting in July, maybe dark that month. In August, hoping to bring you that the second parks maintenance and project status update with our public works team, as well as potentially a update on trails existing conditions feasibility study. This is something that was on the Measure A work plan last year. We've been collaborating with the fire department. They've been doing some fire road mapping in our GIS system, and we're collaborating with them. It seemed like a natural opportunity as a first step to get the map together, and then from there take a look at next steps for feasibility studies. So hoping to bring you an update in August. September, we'd be hopefully looking at a program report from the Center for Pacifics. And then as we move into November, we're in Master Gardener's presentation, our annual citywide park and rec master plan update, some procedural things as we get into the end of the year. So I think in addition to that, we know that we will likely be considering maybe Measure P updates as they arise. If there's any information that we need to share with you, there may be an opportunity to combine those updates with the library board.
Yeah, I'm sure that we'll have at least one meeting in the coming year that's like a formal presentation to the I would think we'd probably try and do a library board park and rec commission meeting. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah.
And it'd be easier for us not to have to do
One
it
meeting
twice.
instead of two.
Yeah.
In addition to that, I think there's a possibility of updates on 620 Canal Street.
I was actually thinking we should do that for the
So
park tour.
that's why I actually, for the meeting, I mentioned 620 Canal.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're great minds think alike.
I
So
know. I know earlier, we were like, where we should we go?
bring a kayak. We could do a kayak tour of the canal.
Just not during king tide.
No.
So I think with that in mind, open it up to any discussion or see if there's any other thoughts from you, ideas, agenda items that you'd like to see.
No, I think not for me, yeah.
Seems pretty comprehensive.
Okay.
It just marks the passage of time when you say, oh, we've seen, it feels like just yesterday we had the presentation from Marin Bachi.
Yes.
I love that.
Okay.
All right, so we can receive the report. Can I get a motion in a second?
I motion to receive the report.
Second. Thank you.
All
Thank you.
right. Commissioner Cabrales,
Yes.
Chair Pasternak,
Yes.
and Commissioner Sandoval.
Yes.
All right, motion approved. Thank you.
All right. Next up is the staff liaison report.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I've had a busy week and I didn't prepare a ton of notes for this one. I think there's a few things that do come to mind. I'll just echo again that you're invited to attend the CPRS banquet. If you're interested, just let me know. I'll probably send an email out following up with that. That's on January 31st. We've got all kinds of programs that are happening this winter. So our activity guide for the fall winter is still current, but we're working on our draft for our spring and summer preview activity guide. That'll be coming out probably late February, early March. So probably bring that up again at the February meeting. But we're really excited about moving into our spring and summer programs. The Terra Pool scheduled to open in late February. So we're kind of starting to talk about the spring season for the pool. I'm excited about that as well. As I mentioned, the sports field allocation, we were actually just going through the pickleweed field annual allocation for 2026. Like I mentioned, we've seen a lot of increased demand there. We're excited about that. We're glad that the community is really out there using the field. We're particularly seeing more demand from youth programs. And to me, I'm also really excited about that. So I think as we're growing and using that field, we're really trying to make sure that we're balancing community access for, just kind of free play, as well as making sure that the user groups who are really needing field space have access to it. So just went through the same thing with Albert Field and allocated for the year. And I think everyone found a nice, happy home. So we're really glad that even though there's increased demand at both facilities, we're able to not have any really significant conflicts this upcoming year. So a couple other updates. I think I mentioned before the meeting, there was a question about Pickleweed Park, the restroom. We're hoping to get that project out to bid this month. And if we're able to do that, we should be hopefully constructing that park restroom in hopefully the first quarter of 2026 here in the next couple of months. Similarly, the top play area there at Pickleweed Park, there were a couple holdups to repair some of the concrete work that was done. We're trying to get a flush curb entrance to that top play area. And we just heard this week that the contractor is gearing up to start that work and hopefully open up that area. Once those two project components are done, aside from some very small kind of punch list items, that project will be wrapped up and completed. I'll be really excited when that one's completely done. So very close. We're planning to proceed with installing a fence at Peacock Gap play area. That was something I think we discussed late last year. The younger kids play area has historically had a fence. The older kids play area has not. And it was raised as a potential health and safety issue that that area doesn't have a fence. There's been some incidents of dogs that are entering the play area. We know that Peacock Gap Park does have a lot of dog use. And so we put some surveys out. There was community support to install the fence. Definitely had a lot of conversations with the community. But at this point in time, we are planning to move ahead. We're going to get one last communication out to the community just to say this is the plan, to share some images of what the fence should look like. We mocked that up and make sure the community is aware about that change because it is a change. But it's in the budget to do that work now, and we think it's an important thing to do now, given the potential health and safety concerns. So I want to make sure you're aware of that as well. And I think with that,
Preschool?
yeah, Pickleweed Preschool, we're wrapping up the detailed design, and most recently received a cost estimate for that project. There's kind of two components to it. There's the buildings themselves, and then there's all the site improvements. Unfortunately, the cost estimates came back a lot higher than we expected. And when we got that cost estimate, we took a look at what we could do to potentially do a little bit of value engineering and maybe get that cost down. We've taken that as far as we can without, I think, impacting the program that we want to see, the quality of the buildings, the quality of the site furnishings that we want to install, but we're still a little bit short. And we're reaching out to other community partners to see if anyone would be interested in partnering with the city to provide funding to help support the construction of this project. We as a city, we're committed to seeing it through. We definitely want to make sure that we do everything we can to build the best possible facility down there at Pickleweed for these kids and the families that really need it. So we are going to see this project through, but unless we're able to find some additional partnership funding, we may need to trim certain elements of the scope of work out. So for example, The site has, right now, we're designing a kids, like a play area, a top play area. We're designing some raised garden beds. We have a engineered shade structure in the center. There's some improvements to the existing hardscape because there's some cracks in some areas there that need to be repaired. You know, if we're unable to find the funding, we may need to start trimming some of those elements of the project out. And I think we've got a priority list that we identified where we said, you know, if we have to cut in certain areas, these would be the things that have the least impact on the program. But we'd love to build it. And so, you know, this is our plea. If you know anyone that has, you know, some funding available that would be interested in having a conversation with us, we'd love to talk. Right now, without doing any of those cuts, we're probably about $300,000 to $400,000 short, and that's without getting bids. You know, our plan right now is to get this project ready to go out to bid this month. We know that we hope we can afford to build the classrooms. That our plan is to make that part of the base bid. And then all of the rest of the project, we would do what's called an add alt and make it an alternate to the project. So we will hopefully get bids on that. And, keeping our fingers crossed, maybe those bids come in within our budget. But if they were to come in over budget, then we'd have to make a decision on whether we could afford it or not at that point in time before we close. So
We've had a few promising conversations, nothing material, full, you know, no full commitments or really that close to that yet, but you know, we have hope that we might be able to bring in some additional funding for it. But any, folks in the granting sector or the philanthropic, because we're kind of on a tight timeline. So I think that's another challenge.
Yeah, I think that as a segue, I think, as a city, we're entering budget season. And I think we're, just like many other agencies, we're taking a look at the economic horizon and we understand that we need to be fiscally responsible. And so I think we're trying to make sure that we deliver this project in a way that is within budget and looking ahead as we're taking a look at, next fiscal year's budget. I think we're expecting that we're going to need to be pretty conservative in how we program, how we plan for expenditures. And I just want to flag that as well. I think as a city, we're having conversations right now about what the budget process is going to look like and how we're going to be proceeding moving forward. So that's it on my end. Anything else you got?
Great, thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, we have opportunity to comment.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. On the fence, I think I agree with the approach. I mean, I personally think fence is not necessary. I'd love to see that money go towards like tables or other amenities to Peacock Gap. But I do think you guys are doing the right thing in terms of the survey results. And so I understand the decision. But my question, I guess, is like, is the fence the complete rest of the extra budget? Or are there any plans for tables, for example? Because I think that would win over. I think if even putting one more table, most of the people who don't want a fence would be completely happy with.
Yeah.
So when we were out there, because we got some comments like that on a number of comments on the survey, like we needed more tables. My memory, correct me if I'm wrong, we were out there for Arbor Day, kind of looking, and there's not space with the existing hardscape to just
put a table in
easy add another table. So there would be, if I'm remembering, there would be pretty significant site work required to just add a table where that current table is.
Okay.
Some of the things we were considering, I think we need to pick up this conversation again, was there's that one bench that's kind of on the outside, relocating that inside and maybe putting another bench. So there's pieces for parents to sit inside the play area.
I think that's a great idea.
So because it's not going to be as easy to go in and out anymore. But yeah, we were like, let's just get another table. But we were having a hard time figuring out like, where would you put it? That's not going to have kind of a pretty big cost.
Sure.
And I did have a conversation with one of our parks maintenance superintendents, and I think we're open to the idea of exploring it. I think we just need to continue that conversation because you're right. I mean, we did hear from the community that would be something that would be a huge benefit. As far as like your budget question, no, this would not take up the whole budget, but then I think it kind of comes down to, again, being fiscally responsible and just making sure that we're allocating those dollars in a way that really makes sense. So I would have to check with the project manager on where this will land us, what the rest of the budget would look like, and what could we get with that budget.
Yes.
And I do think we need to follow up with the project manager around that. Because that one bench is actually in the way. Like I don't think I think it'll impede so that needs to be removed, and I would like to.
I think that's a good idea.
I'll follow up with her. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because a lot of parents sit on the ledge, I guess.
Yeah.
So then obviously there'd be a fence there.
In many areas, the fence is actually going to be behind the ledge because the ledge is not.
You're not just putting it on top. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
That
it
makes-
depends on where, like along the grass, it's going to go behind. But like around, it kind of depends, some of around the trees, it's probably going to go more on.
Yeah,
Um,
I do think it's the right,
yeah.
the right
Yeah.
answer, but yeah.
Yeah. And the areas where the ledge is particularly not, it's got a
Yeah,
lot
it's
of
like-
cracks and stuff. I think it'll go behind, but yeah, so there will still the ledge. I mean, I sit on the ledge at Sun Valley Park all the time. And that that does have a fence on it, and there's still enough ledge to sit on. But.
The other thing I wanted to ask is if I think the answer is no, but in terms of like the signs to the city, like the entrances to the city, are those under the park department's like
Which
maintenance?
signs?
You're talking
Like,
about
like
the highway
grade-
signs, like as you're exiting the highway by.
Yeah, like Central San Rafael exit to the left is a sign, like
The
a
one that has the little bell on it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Are
those are
those-
city signs.
The city signs, but I wouldn't say they're directly under like the Parks Department's purview. That's kind of an interesting conversation. I
Yeah,
mean, it is something that I know that quite a few city staff have talked about in recent months, and we all have a desire to improve those areas, but they're complicated. So the one at the highway off-ramp, kind of the main entrance there, and I'm terrible with street names and intersections, but that one is Caltrans property. So there's some regulations we need to adhere to for where city identification signs can go, how many city signs can go, what can we do, what can't we do, what kind of stuff can be placed there within proximity to the highway on their property. And so, but we've definitely had conversations, and I believe that actually shows up in our 3-year work plan and the city council
a
strategic
high
plan.
priority for the mayor.
yeah, I was
She's
gonna say.
she really wants to improve those. They call it the gateways.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so, my report, I guess, is I attended the planning commission meeting that was, I think, yesterday, 2 days ago.
Tuesday.
Yeah. And that was a big part of the discussion too, is like the impact on the gateway. And
Was 700 Irwin.
yeah. And so then I've heard some community comments about how we need to fix that area as well.
Yeah, and
All of that property under the freeway is Caltrans.
I've definitely been in quite a few conversations where that has come up, particularly related to public art.
Right, yeah.
Tangentially related to that, last night, the Public Art Review Board
Oh, that's a good one.
recommended approval of a new public art project that will propose 5 new art installations in downtown San Rafael. And so that will go to City Council tentatively on February 2nd. But that project proposes a mural on the 3rd Street parking garage, a big mural. It proposes a smaller mural on 2nd Street, kind of near the 2nd and 4th intersection on the west end. It proposes a new mural on the there's a fountain at the Civic Plaza, kind of where Cold Stone is, across from where the temporary pop-up library was. That fountain is proposed to potentially be decommissioned as a working fountain with water, and this new mural would go over top, and there'd be some other potential improvements to lighting down the line. And then there's a temporary sculpture that would be installed for about a year right in front of City Hall. It's 18 feet tall. It's big. It's shiny silver. And another long-term sculpture that would become the property of the city that's proposed to be installed on a long-term basis at 2nd and 4th Street intersection. There's a construction project scheduled to begin there sometime later this year that will kind of reroute traffic at that intersection, and the statue would be placed in one of the kind of the traffic meridians, the intersection there, facing towards Anselmo. So if you're coming into town, that statue would be facing. On a temporary basis, though, until that construction project started, we're proposing that that statue may actually go right here in front of the community center.
Be big.
And it's called Touch the Sky. It is kind of an artistic representation of a woman with these, I would call them like phoenix wings. It's all designed out of Corten steel, so it kind of has that rust kind of gold patina to it. And it's 17 feet tall, and so at the height. And so I think that's a really cool project from my perspective. I'll be excited to see that go to City Council for their final review. But it kind of relates to what is the city doing right now to potentially improve that sense of placemaking and the gateway entrances. And when this project was proposed, it came up. Well, could it potentially go to those gateways? And I think due to the logistical issues, like this one wasn't a good fit for it, but something is happening.
That's great. I was literally thinking about that as I got off the freeway here tonight, and looking at it going, oh, this is kind of sad. I wonder if there's anything we can do about this. That's great. Any other questions? I just had a question about the preschool. Like, where was the misalignment around the budget? Was it mostly in the buildings, or?
I think it's a combination of things. I think it was a big chunk of it was the buildings due to some civil engineering requirements that were imposed in part because of the some new knowledge that came to light about the floodplain requirements at that site, as well as some known settling that happens on that site. So I think initially we went in design anticipating that we would not need to have a slab concrete foundation with sidewalls. We found out that we did require more significant foundation work, and a big chunk of the facility costs went up in response to that. So not only for the foundation itself, but some of the attachments and the way that we work with that vendor to attach the building, it just became a little more costly. With the site furnishings, I think, kind of similarly, we're just looking at rising costs across the board. So, I think when we started this project about a year ago, since then, there's been a lot of external pressures on the economy, and that's definitely showing up in this cost estimate. Like I said, keeping fingers crossed that maybe bids come in lower than we're estimating. It's kind of hard to say right now. This would be proposed to start construction summer of this year. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to see some really competitive bids on this. But I think it's yet to be determined.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's the foundation work because that was a big cost savings when the presentation was given. So got it. Thank you. All right. Well, moving on. Commissioner reports. Does anyone have anything to report?
Do not.
Oh, I jumped again.
That's right. Sorry. Yeah, that's right. I think we know. I have nothing to report either. So, all right. With that, then we can adjourn this meeting at 7:10.